Welcome back to The Explainer. So, have you ever dropped like $1,000 on the absolute newest smartphone, snapped a picture, and immediately thought, wait a second, did my old phone actually take better photos than this? Well, you are definitely not losing your mind. Professional photographers and everyday users alike are starting to notice this very real, incredibly bizarre phenomenon happening in the tech world right now. Today, we're going to unpack this smartphone camera paradox, and we'll discover exactly why the newest hardware sometimes feels like a massive visual downgrade. To really get what's going on here, we have to look at this massive back-to-back photo test that recently blew up in the tech space. A creator actually decided to take the exact same picture with every single iPhone generation, literally from the original iPhone 1 all the way to the 17. And the results? Totally eye-opening. What ended up surprising everyone was that the newest generation was not always this physically far and away winner. Actually, in several scenarios, older phones captured images that just felt more natural and way more pleasing to the human eye. But to understand exactly why a 5-year-old device can somehow beat a brand new flagship phone, we have to talk about the physical limitations of the devices sitting in our pockets right now. Think about it from a professional photographer's point of view. To capture a truly stunning photo, you physically need large glass and space for light to travel. Period. Back when the first iPhone launched in 2007, the camera was kind of just an afterthought, right? We're talking about a tiny 2-megapixel pinhole webcam with zero autofocus. But as we all started valuing quick, high-quality pictures more and more, manufacturers drastically improved those sensors and lenses year over year. The camera bumps on the backs of our phones just kept growing and growing. But right around the 2010s, they hit a literal wall. Physics. Manufacturers basically maxed out how much phone you can comfortably carry in your pocket. Because there was simply no more room left to cram in professional-grade DSLR lenses, those dramatic hardware improvements just started to level off. And that physical wall? It forced a massive technical trade-off. See, true, beautiful depth of fields, where your subject is perfectly sharp but the background falls away into this soft, creamy blur, that comes naturally from a massive physical sensor. You see it effortlessly on a dedicated DSLR or a really maxed-out flagship phone. But because pocket space is so incredibly strictly limited, manufacturers can't exactly put those massive sensors into every single device. So what do? They have to fake it. Instead of relying on a pure hardware approach, modern phones increasingly have to rely on software. They use AI face detection and aggressive algorithmic exposure adjustments to artificially paint in that blur, simulating the depth that a larger lens would normally capture, all on its own. So here is the crucial takeaway. We reached a hardware plateau a really long time ago. 5 years. That is how far back you can go in the smartphone world right now and still pull out a device that takes a perfectly usable, totally fine photo. In ideal broad daylight conditions, pretty much any phone from the past half-decade is going to give you a great shot. But since broad daylight photos were essentially a completely solved problem, smartphone companies had to find a completely new battleground to convince you to keep upgrading your phone every single year. That new battleground became what the industry calls edge cases. Because every single phone takes a good daylight photo now, manufacturers shifted their entire focus to conquering the absolute worst possible shooting conditions. We're talking extreme low light environments where you can barely even see your hand in front of your face. We're talking super fast moving subjects like a dog sprinting through a yard, deep zoom requirements where you're trying to capture a concert stage from the absolute nosebleed section, and perhaps the most challenging of all, entirely backlit scenes. Conquering these extreme edge cases really became the only way to separate a modern brand new camera from a 5-year-old one. Now, to a professional photographer, how these modern phones handle those edge cases is actually a bit insane. Take a completely backlit scene, for example, like someone standing directly in front of a really bright window. Traditionally, physics dictates that if the camera exposes for that bright window, the person becomes a dark silhouette. That's just how natural light works. But with modern smartphone cameras, you can shoot in that exact same extreme lighting, see the person's face perfectly, see the texture of their dark hoodie, and still see the bright blue sky behind them, all in one single shot. Exposing for a subject and a bright background simultaneously completely breaks the natural laws of light and shadow. So how on earth are they pulling this off? They pull it off through computational photography. Instead of just opening a physical shutter and letting light hit a sensor, a modern smartphone functions way more like a supercomputer. The second you press that shutter button, it's instantly capturing multiple frames at entirely different exposures.
It's using smart HDR, it's running tone mapping, executing facial detection, and digitally stitching together the best shadows and the best highlights to artificially construct this beautifully enhanced image. It is forcefully bringing clarity to a scene that shouldn't naturally have it, bypassing those physical camera limitations entirely.
There's actually a brilliant analogy from our source material that perfectly sums up this whole era of smartphone cameras. It's like one of those self-correcting basketball hoops. No matter where you throw the ball, it goes in. Modern computational photography outright refuses to let you take a badly exposed photo. No matter how wildly you point the camera or how genuinely terrible the lighting conditions are, the algorithms will completely bend the image to ensure you get a visible picture. It's incredibly, almost unbelievably foolproof. But that brings us right back to the core of our paradox, doesn't it? If the camera absolutely never misses, and if the algorithms are so incredibly powerful that they can save a shot in pitch darkness, why do our normal everyday photos suddenly look so weird? Well, this is where the pursuit of the perfect photo-taking machine actually started to backfire on us. Think about it. What happens when you take these hyper-aggressive, incredibly powerful survival algorithms that were designed for absolute extreme edge cases, and you forcefully apply them to a regular, perfectly lit daylight photo that didn't need any help to begin with? You can actually watch this shift happening in real time if we track the evolution of the Samsung Galaxy S series. Back in the Galaxy S8 era, phones still mostly used traditional exposure. If a window was behind you, the background was totally blown out. It looked natural, if maybe a bit limited. Then came the S9, which introduced multi-frame HDR. Suddenly, the sky outside the window and the shadows on your face were beautifully preserved. It was this really perfect balance. But if we skip all the way down to today's Galaxy S26, the algorithms have just been cranked up to an absolute extreme. The aggressive tone mapping is trying so hard to fix everything in the scene that it produces a completely unnatural look. Because when manufacturers throw every single software trick in the book at a totally normal photo, it ruins the image by creating these really distinct visual artifacts. You start getting this bizarre haloing effect, like a weird glowing outline around bright windows or the leaves of a plant. But most critically from a photographer's perspective, because the software forcefully raises all the shadows and lowers all the highlights, it completely destroys the natural contrast that professionals rely on to create depth and mood. You end up with completely flat, shadowless lighting. Objects get this unnatural glow to them, and facial features are overlightened to the point where they just look nothing like reality. And honestly, this is exactly why public opinion is shifting back toward older devices. An older generation phone uses a bit less HDR, allows for those natural shadow details, and keeps the contrast true to life. Meanwhile, the current generation often pushes out an image with glowing edges and overprocessed flat lighting. You might think the newest one is technically capturing more data, and sure, maybe it is, but everyday users overwhelmingly prefer the older, less processed photos, especially for social sharing. People want images that feel authentic and raw when they post them online, rather than the heavily rendered, kind of plasticky look of modern computational processing. It simply feels more human. If you're wondering how casual users perceive this overprocessing, it happens every single day through a highly relatable phenomenon known as the snap. You know the feeling. You open your camera app, point it at a scene, and it looks beautiful and perfectly natural in the viewfinder. You press the button. Then you click the little thumbnail to view the photo, and for a split second, you see that natural image before, bam, it literally snaps into place. The software finishes its heavy processing, and right before your eyes, your natural image transforms into a flat, hyper-sharpened, over-processed state. And the more difficult the lighting was, the more dramatic and jarring that snap is.
Okay, so what can you actually do about this to reclaim your photography right now? First off, just recognize this tuning gap. Know that your modern camera hardware is actually excellent. It's just the aggressive software tuning that's getting in the way. Second, bypass that default software by downloading dedicated third-party camera apps. And third, dive into the settings of those apps and manually turn down or completely disable the extreme post-processing and multi-frame HDR. By just turning down that computational interference, you can actually let your amazing hardware do what it was originally meant to do: capture a natural, beautiful moment.
Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to wrap up on. Will smartphone manufacturers ever dial back the algorithms and actually trust us to take natural photos again? Or are we permanently stuck in an era where software gets to decide what reality looks like? It is an incredible balancing act between saving a bad photo and completely ruining a perfect one. I highly encourage you to open up your own smartphone today, point it at a bright window, and watch closely for the snap. Test your own phone's processing. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.